safe haven for extremists. Terrorists operate freely, backed by open governmental support. Sympathy at the top. Leaders openly align with these groups, fueling security concerns. Open threats to India. Extremists issue direct threats, testing diplomatic ties. Is Canada a silent ally to extremism? Let's dive into the impact on global security and India's interests. Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're diving into one of the most complex and heated issues affecting Canada and India: the impact of the Khalistani movement on diplomatic relations and community tensions. This issue has been making headlines, and there's a lot to unpack. So let's get into it. First, let's clarify something right off the bat. Not everyone who identifies with the concept of Khalistan is a terrorist, but here's the catch. Khalistan itself doesn't actually exist as a country. So when people identify as Khalistani, they're not really citizens of an actual place, but they're advocating for a cause that is creating real tensions between India and Canada. Now, things between Canada and India are tense, diplomatic relations are strained, and honestly, there doesn't seem to be a resolution in sight. Part of the issue here is rhetoric. We've seen some pretty intense language thrown around, with accusations that certain groups want to destroy Canada or finish it off. This type of language makes it sound like we're dealing with more than just a political disagreement. And here's where the role of Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau comes in. Critics argue that Trudeau's handling of these issues has left Canada in a very precarious position. By allowing certain extremist ideologies to thrive under the banner of free speech, he may have created an environment where groups like Khalistani extremists feel empowered. And we've seen the effects. Recently, a Hindu temple in Canada was attacked, and though the Hindu community organized a protest in response, the authorities' response has seemed cautious, almost restrained. So why isn't the Canadian government doing more to address these incidents? That's a question many are asking, and some argue that Trudeau has, in a way, allowed these situations to escalate by not taking a stronger stance against those involved in these attacks. This raises concerns about who is really benefiting from Canadian citizenship. Remember, these Khalistani supporters, many of whom are pushing an agenda that harms Canada's diplomatic standing, are actually Canadian citizens, not Indian. They've adopted Canadian nationality and benefit from Canada's laws, constitution, and freedoms. But the question is, where does their loyalty lie? Critics argue that these individuals are actively pursuing an agenda that doesn't prioritize Canadian interests. And by allowing these individuals to operate freely, Canada may be inadvertently supporting an anti-India agenda that's damaging both communities. Tensions have reached a point where Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi took to X, formerly Twitter, and fired off a bold message. "I strongly condemn the deliberate attack on a Hindu temple in Canada. Equally appalling are the cowardly attempts to intimidate our diplomats. Such acts of violence will never weaken India's resolve. We expect the Canadian government to ensure justice and uphold the rule of law." This statement isn't just diplomatic rhetoric, it's a line in the sand, a direct message to Canada to rein in these extremist elements and prevent further attacks on Indian communities and diplomatic missions. And what's really stirring the pot here? Critics argue that Canada's Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, has let these issues fester by allowing extremist rhetoric to thrive under the shield of free speech. Trudeau's critics claim that by not taking decisive action, he's allowed groups like the Khalistani extremists to feel empowered. And now, we're seeing the consequences. In India, the stance is clear. There is zero tolerance for Khalistani separatism. Just recently, when a prominent Khalistani figure in India publicly defied authorities, he was quickly arrested, and his influence has since dwindled. Canada's approach has been vastly different. Here, Khalistanists seem to have more room to operate, even using Canada as a platform to push their narrative on a global stage. And this has really soured relations with India. A notable and positive development, however, is that many Hindus in Canada are standing up. In the past, we saw a lot of restraint. But now, in light of recent attacks, Hindus are organizing and defending themselves. They're taking a stand, sending a message that they won't stay silent as their community and places of worship are targeted. But there's an important distinction here. The majority of Sikhs don't support Khalistan. Many have no interest in the movement, and unfortunately, they often stay silent, maybe out of fear or just wanting to avoid conflict. But here's a call to those Sikhs who oppose the extremism linked to Khalistan. It's time to speak out. This is no longer just about politics. This is about the image of Sikhism around the world. Khalistanis are giving a distorted view of the Sikh faith, associating it with extremism. And as we know, Sikhism's teachings are far from violent or divisive. For peace-loving Sikhs, this is an opportunity to make it clear that these extremists do not speak for them. Let's not forget that Hinduism and Sikhism share so much in common, from principles of peace to respect for all. We have to make sure that extremists don't drive a wedge between communities that have been historically united. So, where do we go from here? Canada needs a clear strategy to address extremism within its borders, and both Hindus and Sikhs in Canada need to unite in rejecting the Khalistani agenda that doesn't represent the broader Sikh community. This is a defining moment, and it's time to reclaim the narrative from the extremists. Thanks for tuning in to the Geo-Politrick guy. If you found this analysis insightful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Let's keep this conversation going in the comments below. I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts. I'm looking forward to